What's up, everybody? How's it going today? It's Carpo here with another random story or question, or posing some sort of a a proposal about life and all it entails. And I imagine this video will probably be something I haven't really thought about how I'm going to attack this subject or what I'll title it, but maybe along the lines of enlightenment being a placebo effect. I actually had this article I was just reading about CBD because I've had so many people, talk about CBD helping them with anxiety, depression, hemorrhoids, you name it. I mean, not literally hemorrhoids, but there are a million different things that people claim that CBD will treat. And as being a cannabis advocate for, since I was 15, I've learned a lot about the plant, and I was interested in CBD long ago, and I knew it would become a popular thing, but I also realized that it was going to become kind of a cure-all. People sell it for anything. So anyway, researching whether or not the certain uses for it would be a placebo effect of people expecting it to work and having it work. And I'm not saying, and this isn't about CBD, nor am I saying it doesn't work, but rather I ended up finding a different article about how the endocannabinoid system, which is what cannabis affects, it's your body's natural cannabis system, if you will, and your body produces what they call anandamide, which is your natural THC in the body. Anandamide was taken from the Sanskrit word which meant bliss, so it's like the bliss molecule, if you will. But another, although cannabis is a favorite, the CB1 receptor, what they found is that by blocking the CB1 receptor, it blocks the effects of your natural endorphins, if you will. Your endogenous morphine. That's what endorphins are. It's endogenous morphine. It's your body's natural painkillers. And a lot of folks may think that you just take opiates and that they, the reason opiates work is because we have receptors for them. The reason we have receptors for them is because we have our own molecules similar to them. And it's the same way with cannabis, which is why, of course, cannabis is a wonderful natural plant to use. It seems to, it does a lot of different things. I won't go into that, but the fact that when you block this molecule, opiate painkillers will still work when you block the CB1 receptor. But when you, but you can't produce your own. So in other words, placebo seems to be affected by the chemistry we have available in our body, which means that some people are going to have a stronger placebo effect, and some people will have a stronger nocebo effect. And so to get to why this is what I mean about the enlightenment being placebo, because I've been thinking about what must it be like to be, let's just say, a Zen master or a top Buddhist monk. Do they think differently? Well, of course they've had different experiences, but the idea to think that being a Buddhist monk naturally makes you a peaceful person is complete nonsense, of course. And when I picture people up in the mountains able to get away from the hustle and bustle of life, I find, of course, you could, have a much slower pace of life and spend more time just being, if you will. But you bring that into the Western world, or rather bring the Western world to you, and then you end up with what we have in Myanmar. And in Myanmar, right now, there are Buddhist monks slaughtering immigrants, Muslims, by the thousands. They're wiping out their villages and burning them down and doing horrific things that you would never believe men in robes could do. And it's circumstantial. So it doesn't matter what you believe or how enlightened you think you are. Really, it depends on your circumstances. So what I thought was, can we bring ourselves, I guess the idea is to use placebo effect to our benefit, right? So we know that the body can affect healing, but there's also the nocebo effect, which is seldom mentioned, but probably more important. these are the people, for example, that think that Wi-Fi is maybe killing them. They hear somebody say that one of their friends was sensitive to electronics, and I'm not saying that there aren't people that are. I'm saying that Bob hears his friend Joe say that he's sensitive to electronics and he can't be around them, and then Bob starts thinking, well, shoot, maybe I am too. I wonder if this is affecting me. They have done plenty of studies with wireless, having people who claim to have sensitivity try to determine whether the devices are on and off just by how they feel. And time and again, they've shown that even when the device is off, they claim that it's on, and vice versa. That it seems that we can trick our minds into thinking that we are being not just healed by medication, but damaged by our environment. So it's kind of a conundrum. It's something that I've thought about quite a bit. The idea that you don't want to say that there aren't dangers out there. Just like a doctor wouldn't want to say that this medication might not work, because that puts the idea in the patient's mind. But by not giving them the truth, then you feel like you're lying. And in the same way, it's kind of like omitting certain information. It's just as bad as lying in some instances. But if it's for the benefit and a person really thinks something is working, if a person's taking a sugar pill and it's curing their cancer, what can you say about that? You know, it's an ethical conundrum that doctors have had for, since they found out about the placebo effect. It's the idea that should you do a study with people who need a medication and then give them something that's not the medication. One of the most interesting things about drug studies is, if you look into it, you'll find that usually placebo studies are very close to the drug itself. And often placebo studies people heal even more. They hide those studies and they tend to pick and choose the ones they want. Selective choices of which studies they want to come out. But who would want the whole medical industry should celebrate the idea that we are able to heal ourselves. But there's that problem creeps in, which is if you're aware of placebo effect, then how can you trick yourself anymore? And this is the biggest issue that I can't seem to resolve myself, which is like, okay, well, if I'm aware that something I'm doing might just be all in my head, can that, cause it to work even less efficiently than if I was just ignorant? The idea that ignorance is bliss. And so there is this side of it that when I thought about enlightenment and how I wanted to kind of tie this in, it was because I was thinking, if placebo effect is such a well-known, well-documented, and factual thing that happens, that in the medical industry we don't understand, but we're doing our best. When we don't understand something in science or in medicine, we don't tend to throw it out in the open and say, everybody, hey, figure this out. It's more like, let's just put that in the drawer and forget about it for a while, because it goes against what we want to believe. It's kind of like in astrophysics, when a formula doesn't work, then they look for a formula that works. So it's all about finding something that suits what you're looking for, and that's hard, because I don't know. I don't know where to go with that, except for, as far as the spiritual thing, the enlightenment, if you will. I don't think really enlightenment has anything to do with knowledge or gaining. Of course, wisdom is always going to be part of it. But I've always thought of, if enlightenment exists, it's a state of mind where you have used placebo to ward off the negativity in your life. Because it's true, there are certain things, if you focus on the negatives, then they will come at you until you stop focusing on them. It's just, everything gets thrown back in our faces. There's these unspoken natural laws, if you will. And a lot of folks dispute that there's any natural laws that have to do with man's values, if you will. I say that if you look at nature, there are certain patterns that nature follows, and the best we can do is hope to mimic that and follow it as well, and say, well, this is what animals do. But then we get all trapped in this idea that, oh, well, we can, then we might as well just go take what we want. But nature doesn't work that way. Nature works in harmony. Nature is it's a functioning system, which includes everything, of course. But so enlightenment would be the idea of discounting all these negative emotions and thoughts that we don't need, but not ignoring them. This is a major misconception, I think, with people. When people get into trying to find themselves, they might go through a phase where everything has to be positive. Where if negative thoughts come into your mind, you're like, oh no, and ward that off, and don't deal with negativity or negative people. Unfortunately, the reality is that we're all immersed in it. Only in Western society can we sometimes just lock ourselves away in our room and decide who we're going to interact with online. In a place where you're constantly facing adversity and tear gas and bombs entering your village and people coming and trying to take your kids, it's a different story. You're forced to, you end up, people end up being the father, the loving father who ends up being, going and gunning down a bunch of guys to protect his family and village. He's not a bad guy. Nobody wants to kill someone, but that's his situation. That's what he ended up in. You have to make the best of what you have. Sometimes that means that you have to do things you would never do or never want to do, and in order to protect yourself. So I guess what I'm getting at is that we tend to hide sometimes from the negativity, the bloodshed. Like, I don't want to watch that, I don't want to see that. And I went through a phase like that when I was in my early kind of spiritual yearning phase, and then I realized, no man, it's really all about balance. I have a hardcore side, crude jokes, and I'm not shy about blood and things like that, but I don't celebrate it or enjoy seeing it. I just think it's important because it impacts us in a way that says, hey, things aren't just hunky-dory for everybody in the world, and nor does it mean it has to consume us. And so being aware of what's going on without letting it consume you is one of the crucial elements to what I would consider enlightenment. When I see old wise men and teachers and prophets and Zen masters, which Zen masters are some of the funniest damn people. I mean, just reading the writing, the Zen poems and the koans they have, which are like these Zen poems, fascinating looks not into poetry, nor even into human nature, but rather conundrums we run into, conflicts of interest. We become ambivalent about certain things. We can't decide which to choose. The cognitive dissonance. Ambivalence was the preferred word that I found recently to use. As we grow, we learn better ways to define ourselves, to express ourselves, and all the while, I think understanding placebo effect and how we really do create our own reality is important, without getting so wrapped up in it that we think, I can manifest all my dreams and money and desires, and being disappointed when you don't get that. You have to be, I think, personally, that you have to be reasonable about your wants and desires and what you want out of life. But when it comes down to just merely being happy, we overlook that one a lot, but it's a hard one. We tend to be a little bit easily depressed about things, and I guess things can hit home pretty hard. We lose a loved one, even if it's a loved one we didn't know very well, and it can be heartbreaking. So we learn to build up not a callous soul, but calluses on our soul to defend ourselves, on our heart, against these things. And so then we become, we feel like almost like we become, wow, it's windy out there. It's a beautiful October day. We become like kind of raw, and things don't affect us the way that they used to. But it comes and goes, is what I've found. It's about riding that wave. I've had times where I went through a period where I couldn't watch any violence in movies for like months. And I was like, God, this is just, oh, I hate it. And I still feel that way, even today. There's only a few years ago. But recently it's more like, okay, come on, do you really have to show all this bloodshed? I don't like it. I have family, I have kids, and I don't want them seeing that. I grew up, my oldest son's 24, just turned 24 2 days ago, and he learned to play video games when we sat around playing, some of the early Nintendos, like Turok, the Dinosaur Hunter, and 007, where you're hunting each other down with guns. And it was hard, it's painful to watch. Kids grow up in that, but they're not, I'm going to do a video about that separate. So I won't go into that. I'm doing a video about family and kids. So I know I went from placebo into the enlightenment thing. I probably should have left the enlightenment part out because it's a cheesy term and really has no meaning if we can't live it. But anyhow, maybe it's something to think about, something to process. talk to y'all later. Have a wonderful day. Peace out.